So today I'm working with a company called MEDICU, and I brought my friend along, Dr. Taha, soon to be. And would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes.
Go on.
Hi guys, I'm Nora. I'm one of the co-founders of MEDICU, and this is Manahal.
I'm also one of the co-founders of MEDICU.
We're also third year medical students like Raihan, and today we're filming like a ton of videos for you guys to help you out with your interviews. So what MEDICU does is basically our aim is to provide the most effective and accessible support for medical school applicants. So right now we're running our medical school interview courses, and they've been running from the end of October and they're going to end in January. So if you're interested, there'll be links down below. Definitely have a look. They're extremely good. Like, even if I say so myself. One thing that really makes us stand out is that we cover panel and MMI, and no other courses do that. And we have practice, panel and MMI rotations. Hi Ryan, I'm Dr. Abdoon, a clinical lecturer here.
I'm Miss Mateen with the orthopedic surgeons at the teaching hospital.
Take a seat please. So Ryan, thanks for coming down here. You are coming from Newcastle?
Yeah, from Newcastle.
Great. It's really cold up there.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. So I think we're just going to delve straight into the interview, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's fine.
So I'm just going to start off by asking you, why have you chosen to study medicine, Ryan?
I think the main reason that I chose to study medicine was because I've always had a genuine interest in biology, more so the human biology aspect of it, and I enjoy the topics like the heart, the kidneys, when we were going through it in GCSE and A-level, and that sort of sparked my initial interest. Another thing as well with medicine, I like the fact that there's a lot of communication involved. I see myself as a person who's very sociable, who likes to talk to people, meet new people, and medicine is a perfect combination of science and communication, and that's the main reason I chose to study medicine.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned that you like biology and you like communicating, and that's a sort of combination that you'd love to have in a career. You know, one question I have for you is, why not go into nursing? It's a very similar sort of combination.
Mm-hmm. So during my work experience, I shadowed doctors and I shadowed nurses, and when I was shadowing the nurses, I came to realise how important they actually are in the NHS, the amount of work that they have to do, their role in the NHS, and how helpful they are. But the thing about being a doctor is that the doctor has the ultimate responsibility over a patient, so they make that final decision, and it's something that I admire and I'd love to be a part of. I like responsibility, and I thrive off responsibility, and it's what motivates me to work hard.
Mm-hmm. That's very good. I mean, I've never come across someone who likes responsibility, but if you do, that's great.
Okay. So, how would you say that your friends describe you if you had to give me 2 words?
I'd hope they'd describe me in a positive way, but the 2 words that I'd probably say are driven and empathetic.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the reason I say driven is because if I put my mind to anything, I will achieve it, and it doesn't matter how long it takes or how hard I have to work, I will go for it. And even if it means I have to make a few sacrifices, I don't mind. Empathetic is because often I put myself in other people's shoes just to gain an insight into what it's like being them, so that I can relate with them and even help them out in situations that they're going through. So I'd probably say driven and empathetic.
Okay, so you mentioned empathy.
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell me what you think the difference between empathy and sympathy is?
Sympathy is relating with someone going through a situation. Empathy is understanding something that they're going through and trying to do something about it. So for example, if I were to walk past a homeless person on the street and it was cold, if I was sympathetic, I would say, oh, you must be cold. If I was empathetic, I would say, you look really cold, here's a blanket.
Right, so actively helping them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So, do you feel that you've ever failed at anything? And if you have, how did you recover from this?
The time that I have failed at something recently would be my A-levels. So I do biology, chemistry and economics at A-level, and in my first year of A-level I struggled with economics because it was a new subject to me, and I've always been into my sciences, and that resulted in me getting a D in my first year of A-levels. However, in my second year of A-levels, I was determined to pull my D up to an A grade because I needed the A grade to get into medicine. So I worked really hard throughout the whole year. I quit my job. I didn't see my friends as much. You know, I got rid of social media in order to boost my grade up from a D, and I had to reset the exams from the first year, and eventually I ended up with an A star. And the only reason I got that is because I realised where I went wrong in my first year, worked on that, and then eventually, you know, saw the reward from that.
That's very impressive. You're going to have to get used to not seeing your friends a lot if you get into medicine.
So, being a doctor is a really challenging career, and through your work experience, what kind of challenges have you seen doctors encounter?
So while I was doing my work experience in the hospital, I was mainly shadowing the nurses. However, I got the chance to speak to some of the doctors, and especially some doctors on the A&E ward, and I remember they emphasised how emotionally challenging working in some of the wards can be. So they said that, you know, sometimes they saw patients very young going through, you know, in a traumatic experience, and they could sometimes, that image or that patient would stay with them or in their mind for a few days. So it can be emotionally challenging, it can be physically challenging. I mean, you're not working a 9-to-5 job, you're working long hours. Often you might have to do a night shift, and that can put a physical strain on you. Another challenge that I also noticed that the doctors highlighted was that you can't save every patient you get, so often you have to come to terms with that, and there's a lot of responsibility as well as a doctor.
Okay, so thank you for that. Can you tell me about a time where you worked in a team? Because obviously medicine involves a lot of teamwork, as I'm sure you know from your work experience. So tell me about a time where you worked in a team and the sort of challenges that you faced.
During secondary school, I tried out a few different sports, and the one that I mainly enjoyed was rugby, and that was the one that I carried on for the most number of years. And it was quite challenging because we did go through some years where we weren't doing as well as we did in previous years, and just the team can get demotivated. Now, I don't like it when the team gets demotivated, because then it rubs off on other people, and it can affect the team as a whole. So I like to be the person that sort of tries to bring morale up and motivate everyone else in the team, so that we at least aim to, you know, do better and work better than we previously have. So I like to be the character that motivates the team.
So you acknowledge that medicine has loads of challenges, as you said. So what steps have you taken to find out whether it's the right career for yourself?
So I've done a week in a GP to gain an idea and an insight into primary care, and it was quite challenging, and I got to saw, you know, the challenges, but also the benefits or the positive side of primary care, and it was something that I enjoyed and quite liked. I also did work experience in a hospital. It was more so voluntary work because it was once every week for a period of 12 months, and I managed to shadow doctors, speak to doctors, to gain a better idea of what it's actually like to be a doctor.
What have you learned from this?
When I did the week in a GP, I noticed one of the partners, he used to come into work with the biggest smile on his face, with a cup of coffee in his hand, and he would take his time to say hello or good morning to every person who was working in the GP. whether it be the admin staff, whether it be the nurses or the doctors. And I noticed how all of the staff members looked at him quite highly and respected him and enjoyed his presence. And I think that played a crucial role in the functioning of the team at that GP. And I think communication, teamwork plays a big role in being a doctor, and it affects how a whole team, or even the care that a patient receives, it can ultimately affect that. So
Okay, thank you. So I'm sure that medicine is a very stressful career, especially for junior doctors who are working very long hours. So what do you do to cope with stress that you will be doing later on as well?
Currently, the main ways that I like to de-stress is the gym. So often, if I've spent quite a lot of time revising for my A-levels or for my GCSEs, then I like to spend 1 or 2 hours in the gym that evening to sort of get everything off my mind and off my chest, and focus on something else. And it benefits me as well in a good way. I'm looking after my health. Other things that I like to do as well, I like to play sports, so football. Every weekend we play football. Me and a few of my friends, we have a football team, a 5-a-side league. Other things, another thing which I quite enjoy, a hobby of mine, is photography. So again, sometimes when I get stressed, I like to go out and do a bit of photography.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for coming today. That's the end of the interview. Do you have any questions for us?
Thank you very much for the opportunity, but I did have a lot of questions before I came, but speaking to the medical students before the interview, they clarified everything, and so I don't have any questions. But
Great.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for coming. It was great speaking to you.
Thank you.
You're waving the pen around like this and scream. You're like, interview's really good.
Okay, I'm gonna do that
No, because it's bobbing at the bottom of the screen.
So now we're going to go over the feedback for Rehan. Overall, it was a very good interview. He had good body language, good eye contact. In terms of each question, so let's look at the why medicine question. For why medicine, he answered well. He talked about the fact that he liked biology and medicine being able to offer a combination of the biological sciences and also the communication aspect, which is something that he really enjoys. What he could have improved on is talking about his work experience. He could have brought in his work experience and said that really solidified his desire to study medicine, but not obviously gone into it in too much detail, just a broad overview of what he did for work experience. Another thing that he could have said, but it might not have applied to him, but something that could apply to other people, even myself, is the problem-solving aspect of medicine.
So for the why not nursing question, that was really well answered. I think it's really important to bring in your work experience, and if you have organised work experience with nurses, that's really good because it actually shows them that you've taken your time out to work out what the difference between a nurse and a doctor actually is, because their roles do overlap. It's really important to not undermine the role of a nurse, because you might actually have a nurse on your panel and you don't want to undermine what they do. So acknowledge that they play a really important part in the hospital, and that's something that you've seen and that you appreciate. But do highlight some of the differences, as Rehan did, between the roles of a doctor and the nurse. So you can get really specialist nurses out there, but the roles in a nurse and doctor, the difference is that the doctor is the one who has the ultimate responsibility for the patient and makes the final decision for their care. And although nurses are really important, you would be better suited to the role of a doctor because you can give more back in that role as opposed to one of being a nurse.
Mm-hmm. And make sure you don't say that nurses, that you'd rather be a leader, because doctors are not leaders, they work in teams. Don't say you want to prescribe, because specialist nurses can do that too. Don't say you want to diagnose, because specialist nurses can do that too. So be very careful with that question. So another question that we asked was, how would your friends describe you in 2 words? So Mahal, do you have feedback for him?
I think that was really well answered. I think they were both really good words. So being driven is really important, and he used examples to back up both of them. So I think overall that was really well answered. I don't think that there's anything you could really improve on.
Definitely, and especially because there were 2 qualities that are needed for a doctor, and the only reason they're asking him this question is because they want to see if he'd be a good doctor. So make sure that if asked this question, you bring up 2 qualities that are required as a doctor. And another thing is that he didn't just list them, he said why. So he said why his friends would describe him as driven and why they would describe him as empathetic. The next question was, what's the difference between empathy and sympathy? And not many people know the difference, but he answered it perfectly. Empathy is understanding a person's situation and actively trying to help them, whereas sympathy is just relating with their situation or just relating with their emotions.
I then asked him if he had failed at anything, and this is a question that really throws people off, because if anything in an interview you want to give positives about yourself, you're not really open to go in and give them negatives. But he did a really good job and he was really honest about it. What's important is not where you failed. It doesn't matter as long as you can reflect on that, because there's instances where everyone fails. As long as you can show that you've learned from that experience and you've been able to turn it around into a positive experience, that's really all that matters. So he mentioned that he worked really hard, and the steps that he took to make sure that he could move his grade up from a D to an A. That's really important because it shows them that in the future, if you do ever fail, you know what you need to change to do your best.
If you're ever asked for something that's quite negative, like for example, what's your greatest weakness, or like this question, always turn it into a positive like Raihan did here.
So the next question I asked him was what challenges he's seen doctors face on his work experience. And this is really, really important because they want to know that you have a realistic understanding of what a career in medicine involves. It's not just like being in Grey's Anatomy. There's lots of hard times, and there's instances where you do really have second thoughts about pursuing a career in medicine. So it's really important that you show that through your work experience you've been exposed to some of these challenges. So it's really important that you bring in your work experience into this example, not just list but go into them, and also mention a bit about how you plan to sort of overcome these challenges. So you understand that it's a stressful career, but you've made sure that because of that you've got appropriate coping mechanisms in place to actually overcome these challenges.
Definitely. And again, turn a negative into a positive. Say, talk about, yes, in medicine you have to make sacrifices, but to you, the sacrifices are worth it. So then another question that we asked him was, what steps has he taken to decide whether medicine was the right thing for him? So one thing that he did really well here was he mentioned his work experience, and not only did he do that, because that's a given, you have to do that, but he mentioned how he did work experience in primary care at GP surgery, and also he mentioned work experience in secondary care, and he mentioned volunteering. So that's a wide range of different work experiences, which is really good. But one thing that he could have done better was reflected a bit more on each experience. So for example, if you've done a ton of different placements, make sure that you don't just list them. You pick a particular, you can give a very broad statement, I've done my experience here, here and here, how long you did them for and who you were shadowing, but then as fast as you can, go into detail about a particular situation. For example, if you saw a certain ethical scenario which made you realise that doctors always have to think on their feet, or if you observed a doctor in a team working role and if that inspired you to study medicine, make sure you mention that. Then another question that we asked at the end was, how do you cope with stress? You have to prepare for this for your medical school interviews because it most likely will be asked. And he mentioned gym, he mentioned sports, photography. This is all really good stuff. They're all coping mechanisms. Other stuff that you could mention is maybe you have a very good support network that you can offload to. And another thing that I'd say to improve on Raihan's answer would be to mention how he deals with stress if he's not in an environment where he can go and start taking photos or go to the gym. Maybe he's on a ward as a junior doctor and he's got a lot of tasks to do and he's stressed out. What you have to do in these situations is take a step back, breathe, look at all the things you've got to do, prioritize. That's how you can deal with stress in situations where you can't do those activities. And then when it came to the team working question, tell me about a time where you worked in a team, he answered it really well. He used STAR, the STAR framework, so situation, task, action, result. But also it's a good idea to reflect, which he did do, and also link it back to medicine. So wherever you can, link things back to medicine, and I think Raihan did that. Because in medicine, you're always going to have to be working in a team. And questions like this, you can use the buzzword multidisciplinary team, MDT. Doctors always work in multidisciplinary teams along with nurses, OTs, physios, and nutritionists, etc. So be prepared for that. So that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Follow our social media, the links will be down below. If you're interested in attending our medicine interview course, also the link will be down below. That's it from us.
Thank you very much for watching.
Good luck with your interviews. Bye.